We recognise our first Australian people with an extract from the writing of Marianne Rose on Gundamar titled Dadiri.
Our Aboriginal culture has taught us to be still and to wait. We do not hurry things up. We let them flow in natural course, like the seasons.
We watch the moon in each of its phases. We wait for the rain to fill our rivers and water the thirsty earth. When twilight comes, we prepare for the night.
At dawn, we rise with the sun. We watch the bush foods and wait for them to ripen before we gather them. We wait for our young people as they grow stage by stage through their initiation ceremonies.
When a relation dies, we wait a long time with the sorrow. We own our grief and allow it to heal slowly.
We do not like to hurry. There is nothing more important than what we
Time. We wait for him to make his word clear to us. We don't worry. We know that in the time and in his spirit of Dadiri, that deep listening and quiet stillness, his way will be clear.
We are river people. We cannot hurry the river. We have to move with its current and understand its ways.
How McDougall Topped the Score by Thomas Edward Spencer. A peaceful spot is Piper's Flat. The folk that live around, they keep themselves by keeping sheep and turning up the ground. But the climate is erratic and the consequences are the struggle with the elements is everlasting war. We plough and sow and harrow, then sit down and pray for rain. Then we all get flooded out and have to start again. But the folk are now rejoicing as they've never rejoiced before, for we've played Molongo cricket and McDougall topped the score.
Molongo had a head on it and challenged us to play a single innings match for lunch, the losing team to pay. We were not great guns at cricket, but we couldn't well say no. So we all began to practice and we let the reaping go. We scoured the flat for 10 miles round to muster up our men, but when the list was totaled, we could only number 10.
Then up spoke Big Tim Brady. He was always so to speak, and he said,
"What price McDougall, who lives down Cooper's Creek?"
So we sent for old McDougall, and he stated in reply that he'd never played at cricket, but he'd half a mind to try. He couldn't come to practice, he was getting in his hay, but he guessed he showed the beggars from Molongo how to play. Now McDougall was a Scotchman, and a canny one at that, so he stated into practice with a paling for a bat. He got Miss Mac to bowling, but she couldn't run at all, so he trained his sheepdog Pincher to pitch the ball.
Now Pincher was no puppy. He was old, worn and grey, but he understood McDougall and accustomed to obey. When McDougall cried out, "Fetch it!" he would fetch it in a trice, but until the word was "Drop it," he would grip it like a vice. And each succeeding night they played until the light grew dim. Sometimes McDougall struck the ball, sometimes the ball struck him. Each time he struck the ball would plough a furrow in the ground, and when he missed, the impetus would turn him 3 times round.
The fatal day at length arrived, the day that was to see Molongo bite the dust, or Piper's Flat knocked up a tree. Molongo's captain won the toss and sent his men to bat, and they gave some leather hunting to the men of Piper's Flat. When the bowl sped where McDougall stood, firm planted in his track, he shut his eyes and turned around and stopped it with his back. The highest score was 22, the total 66, when Brady sent a Yorker down that scattered Johnson's sticks.
Then Piper's Flat went into bat for glory and renown, but like grass before the scythe, our wickets tumbled down.
9 wickets down to 17, 50 more to win.
Our captain heaved a heavy sigh and sent McDougall in.
£10 to 1, you lose it.
Cried a barracker from town, but McDougall said,
"I'll take it, Mum."
and planked the money down. Then he girded up his moleskins in a self-reliant style, threw off his hat and boots, and faced the bowler with a smile.
He held the bat the wrong side out, and Johnson, with a grin, stepped lightly to the bowling crease and sent a wobbler in. McDougall spooned it softly back, and Johnson waited there. But McDougall, crying, "Fetch it!" started running like a hare. Malongo shouted,
Victory, he's out to his eggs.
when Pincher started through the crowd and ran through Johnson's legs. He seized the ball like lightning, then he ran behind a log, and McDougall kept on running while Malongo chased the dog.
They chased him up, they chased him out, they chased him around, and then he dived through a slip rail as the scorer shouted. McDougall puffed. Malongo saw. Excitement was intense. As the scorer marked down,
20.
Pincher cleared a barbed wire fence.
Let us hit him.
Shrieked Malongo,
Rain is Malongo with the bat.
Run it out, good old McDougall.
yelled the men of Piper's Flat. And McDougall kept on jogging, and then Pincher doubled back. And the scorer counted
40.
as they raced across the track.
McDougall's legs were going fast. Malongo's breath was gone, but still Malongo chased the dog. McDougall struggled on. When the scorer shouted,
50.
they knew the chase could cease. Then Pincher dropped the ball and McDougall gasped out
Drop it!
as he dropped within his crease. Then Pincher dropped the ball as instinctively as he knew. Discretion was a wiser plan. He disappeared from view. And as Malongo's beaten men, exhausted, lay around, we raised McDougall shoulder high and bore him from the ground.
We brought him to McGuinness, where lunch was ready laid, and filled him up with whiskey punch, for which Malongo paid. We drank his health and bumpers, and we cheered him 3 times 3. And Malongo got its best. Malongo joined the spree. And the critics say they never saw a cricket match like that, when McDougall broke the record in the game at Piper's Flat. And the folk are jubilating, as they never did before. For we played Malongo cricket, and McDougall topped the score.
Globy room.
Said Hanrahan in accents most forlorn. Outside the church, mass began one frosty Sunday morn.
The congregation stood about, co-collars to the ear, and talked of stopping crops and drought as it done for years.
It's looking good.
Said Daniel Croak.
Dan shook me, man. Never since banks went broke, the season's been so bad.
It's dry, alright?
Said young O'Neill, with which astute remark he squatted down upon his heel and chewed a piece of bark.
And so around the chorus ran.
And all the globy rooms
Said Hanrahan.
before the year is out. The crops are done. You'll have your work to save a bag of grain. From here way out to back of Burke, they're singing out for rain. They're singing out for rain.
He said.
And all the tanks are dry.
The congregation scratched his head and gazed around the sky.
There won't be grass in any case enough to feed an ass. There's not a blade on Casey's place as I come down to mass.
If rain don't come this month.
Said Dan and cleared his throat to speak.
Globy room!
Said Hanrahan.
If rain don't come this week.
A heavy silence seemed to steal on all at his remark, and each man squatted on his heel and chewed a piece of bark.
We want an inch of rain, we do.
O'Neill observed at last, but Croak maintained we wanted to put the danger past.
If we don't get free, me man, all forward to break this drought. Globy room!
Said Hanrahan.
Before the year is out.
In God's good time down came the rain, and all the afternoon, on iron roof and window pane, it drummed a homely tune.
And through the night it pattered still, and lightsome, gladsome eaves, on dripping spout and window sill, kept talking to themselves.
It pelted all day long, a singing at its work, till every heart took up the song way out Tobacco Burke.
and every creek a banker ran, and Dansfield overtop,
Glory room!
said Hanrahan.
If this rain doesn't stop.
And stop it did in God's good time, and spring came into fold, a mantle over the hill sublime with green and pink and gold.
And days went by on dancing feet, with harvest hopes immense, and laughing eyes behold the wheat nodding over the fence.
And oh, the smiles on every face, as happy lad and lass, through grass knee deep on Casey's place, went riding down to Mass.
While round the church enclosed gentle discoursed the men of mark, and each man squatted on his heel and chewed a piece of bark.
There'll be bushfires for sure, me man. There will, without a doubt. We'll all be ruined
Said Hanrahan.
before the year is out.
My Country by Dorothy McKellar. The love of field and coppice, of green and shaded lanes, of ordered woods and gardens is running in your veins. Strong love of grey blue distance, run streams and soft driven skies. I know they cannot share it, my love is otherwise. I love a sunburned country, a land of sweeping plains, of rugged mountain ranges, droughts, flooding rains. I love her far horizons, I love her jewel sea, her beauty and her terror, the wide brown land for me. The stark white ringbark forest, all tragic to the moon, the sapphire misted mountains, the hot gold hush of noon. Green tangle of the brushes, with the light lianas coil, orchids deck the treetops, and ferns the warm dark soil. Core of my heart, my country, her pitiless blue sky. When sick at heart around us, we see the cattle die. But then the grey clouds gather, and we can bless again the drumming of an army, the steady soaking rain. Core of my heart, my country, land of the rainbow gold. For flood and fire and famine, she pays us back threefold. Watch after many days the filmy veil of greenness that thickens as we gaze. An opal-hearted country, a willful, lavish land. All you have not loved her, you will not understand. Earth holds many splendors, wherever I may die. I know to what brown country my homing thoughts will fly.
The Man from Ironbark by Andrew Barton Patterson. It was the man from Ironbark who struck the Sydney town. He wandered over street and park, he wandered up and down. He loitered here, he loitered there, till he was like to drop, until at last, in sheer despair, he sought a barber's shop.
Here, shave me beard and whiskers off. I'll be a man of mark. I'll go and do the Sydney top. I'm home in Ironbark.
The barber man was small and flash, as barbers mostly are. He wore a strike-your-fancy sash, he smoked a huge cigar. He was a humorist of note and keen at repartee. He laid the odds and kept the tote, whatever they may be. And when he saw our friend arrive, he whispered,
Here's a lark. Just watch me catch him all alive, this man from Ironbark.
There were some gilded youths that sat along the barber's wall. Their eyes were dull, their heads were flat, they had no brains at all. To them the barber passed the wink, his dexter eyelid shut.
I'll make this bloomin' yokel think his bloomin' throat is cat.
And as he soaped and rubbed it in, he made a rude remark.
I suppose the flats are pretty green up there in Ironbark.
A grunt was all reply he got. He shaved the bushman's chin, then made the water boiling hot and dipped the razor in. He raised his hand, his brow grew black. He paused a while to gloat, then slashed the red-hot razor back across his victim's throat. Upon the newly shaven skin, it made a livid mark. No doubt it fairly took him in, the man from Ironbark. He fetched a wild up-country yell, might wake the dead to hear, and though his throat he knew full well was cut from ear to ear, he struggled gamely to his feet and faced the murderous foe.
You've done for me, you dog. I'm beat. One hit before I go. I only wish I had a knife, you bloody murdering shark. But you'll remember all your life the man from Ironbark.
He lifted up his hairy paw with one tremendous clout. He landed on the barber's jaw and knocked the barber out. He set to work with tooth and nail. He made the place a wreck. He grabbed the nearest gilded youth and tried to break his neck. And all the while his throat he held to save his vital spark. And
Murder! Bloody murder!
yelled the man from Ironbark. A peal of men who heard the din came in to see the show. He tried to run the bushman in, but he refused to go. And when at last the barber spoke and said,
"'Twas only fun. 'Twas all a little harmless joke. A trifle overdone." A joke?
he cried,
By George, that's fine. A lively sort of luck. I'd like to catch that murdering swine some night in Ironbark.
and now all round the shearing floor the listening shearers gape. He tells the story over and over and brags of his escape.
Them barber chaps which keep it tight. By George, I've had enough. One tried to cut my blooming throat. Thank the Lord, it's tough.
And whether he's believed or not, there's one thing to remark, that flowing beards are all the go way up in Ironbark.
Clancy of the Overflow by Andrew Barton Patterson. I had written him a letter, which I had, for want of better knowledge, sent to where I met him down the Lachlan years ago. He was shearing when I knew him, so I sent a letter to him, just on spec, addressed as follows: Clancy of the Overflow.
And an answer came directed, in a writing unexpected, and I think the same was written, with a thumbnail dipped in tar. 'Twas his shearing mate who wrote it, and verbatim I will quote it. Clancy's gone to Queensland droving, and we don't know where he are.
In my wild, erratic fancy, visions come to me of Clancy gone a droving down the Cooper where the western drovers go. As the stock is slowly streaming, Clancy rides behind them singing, for the drover's life has pleasures that the townsfolk never know.
And the bush hath friends to meet him, and their kindly voices greet him, in the murmur of the breezes, and the river on its bars. And he sees the vision splendid of the sunlit plains extended, and at night the loungeous glory of the everlasting stars.
I'm sitting in my dingy little office, where a dingy ray of sunlight struggles feebly down between the houses tall, and the foetid air and gritty of the dusty, dirty city. Through the open window floating spreads its foulness over all.
And in place of lowing cattle, I can hear the fiendish rattle of the tramways and the buses making hurry down the street, and the language uninviting of the gutted children fighting comes fitfully and faintly through the ceaseless tramp of feet.
And the hurrying people daunt me, and their pallid faces haunt me, as they shoulder one another in their rush and nervous haste, with their eager eyes and greedy, and their stunted forms and weedy. The townsfolk have no time to go. They have no time to waste.
And I somehow rather fancy that I'd like to change with Clancy, like to take a turn at droving, where the seasons come and go, while he faced the round eternal of the cash book and the journal. But I doubt he'd suit the office.
Clancy of the Overflow.